Stand by. Contact.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Pit Talk, pulling pits and opinions with your host, Gunny G, where service members help service members, period. Follow, like, subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts and on all social media platforms. Let me know how I'm doing. Any criticism is good criticism. Let's get into it. We got a special guest hailing in from the West Coast. I'll let him introduce himself. The recruiter of the year, recruiter of the Marine Corps, face of the Marine Corps, Lamont Cordell. Everybody. Hey, all right, that's enough. Introduce yourself. Let them know where you're at. Let's say hello to the listeners.
First of all, that is an official introduction. I need to step my game up 110%. But my name is Lamont Hicks. I use Lamont Cordell because Cordell is my middle name. And once my Instagram started blowing up, I wanted to make sure that I put my family in a safe space and that our family name was not touched, and that anything that anybody had to say, they were using the name that was given to me, not the name that is a part of my family lineage. So for anybody that is confused, my name is Lamont Cordell Hicks. I use Lamont Cordell and for that reason. Now, I have been in the Marine Corps for 16 years. I just signed my final enlistment. At least that's what I believe to be true. Just signed my final enlistment. I started off in 2008. My very first duty station was 1-3 over in Hawaii. I believe that unit is no longer existent. So I was there my first 4 years. I worked there as the commanding officer's radio operator. So by trade, I am communications, and went from there to third tracks, which at some point had some, I won't even go there, but I went to third tracks, was the platoon sergeant there, had a really good time. Honestly, that was one of the duty stations where I got to not just enjoy some of the free time, because when you're attached to a grunt unit, you're on their rotation. So you're constantly training and preparing for deployment. So yeah, we had those windows where we go have a good time, but my goodness, it's nothing like when you come over to a part of the West Coast where the unit's not really deployable like that. And yes, you have training, but for the most part, you're working a normal schedule and you get to enjoy your time. From there, went to Oki. Didn't want to go to Oki, I have you know. And it ended up being one of the better duty stations that I've worked at. And then from there, went to recruiting duty. And it was a long fought journey for me to go on recruiting duty. I had been trying to do it since I was a sergeant, but I had a hand tattoo. And I had to get that hand tattoo removed in order for me to go on recruiting duty. Fast forward, I finished my first stint on recruiting duty. Apparently, I loved abuse. So I went back to the fleet for a year. I about faced and came back out to the streets within a year. And here we go.
My goodness. You're high as a kite. I bet you that cap is too tight. That's what that is, dog. Don't play. Oh my goodness. Well, if it ain't you, or excuse me, if it ain't me, it's got to be you. Thank you for your service.
There we go.
But yeah, the streets, man, fresh off the streets. That's what this podcast session's about. And I will say, it was either recruiting or drill instructor duty, and I picked the easier route. Thank God.
What makes you say it's the easier route?
I don't know.
What makes you say that?
Actually, you know what? I would say it wasn't easy. I tell you what, it was a small deployment every 3 months, and my time was spent on the boys. And when I did see my family, I seen them for 30 minutes at a time, and it was around 8:30, maybe 7:30 to 8:30, around there. When they came, it was in and out, hug, kiss, dinner, and right back on the boys, because lights, evening BDR was about to happen, and that's just how it was. And I thought that was easier route.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, right. And I thought that was easier route, but it was definitely difficult for me and my family. I will say that the SDA amplified any issues that we did have. Whether mostly my fault or not, they definitely didn't help the situation. So thank God we're out of it. Thank God we're from that season moving forward. So, but it was an experience pros and cons to the duty station. I'd say I'm pretty sure we'll get into it right now, fresh off the streets, man. I'll tell you right now. We'll get into yours right now in a second. But that's my quick background. This is your show. I want to learn about you and your family and your adversity and resilience. So do service members and so do the listeners. So we got to get into it, man. Family, it's a big thing. If you go single to an SDA, I'd say it's a little easier, but it's hard nonetheless. But when we take a family, there's a different dynamic, especially when we have children at the same time. Can you share how, since we're going to get right into it, can we share how recruiting duty affected you as an individual, as a father first, right? And then as a husband, and then just overall dynamic for family?
Okay, so what I'll give you is one, I don't think that drill instructor is the easier to duty. If you do it appropriately, they are both just as hard as one another and they both serve their purposes, right? Number two, when it comes to the statement that you made coming onto an SDA as a single Marine, my goodness, if you are not killing it at your SDA as a single Marine, it makes me want to put you in a chokehold, right? Because you have that freedom of movement that Marines that have a family don't. And it's not that the family hinders you, it's just that you have extra responsibility. And it's not a responsibility that you want to relinquish or put aside, right? So what I will say is, as a father, you do find yourself in a position where, you're not as present as you'd like to be. You're probably, for us on recruiting duty, you're burning the candle on both ends of the stick. I would wake up and I'd be at my office prior to my family waking up. And then by the time it's time to get them ready for bed, I'm coming in just in time to brush teeth, sing them a song, read them a story, say a prayer, and put them in bed, and that takes a toll, not just on you, but it takes a toll on your kids. And you can see it in the questions that they ask you. Shoot, just the other day, my middle daughter looked at me and she goes, "Dad, when are you retiring?" And it's like, that is the fallout of me being on recruiting duty. Now, because I started recruiting duty when my middle daughter was born, that's the only thing she's ever known in the Marine Corps. She hasn't known 72s and 96s. She hasn't known family fun days. She hasn't known any of those attributes that create the camaraderie and help to fold the family into what the Marine Corps is. All she's ever known is dad is not home, right? And I think it takes a deliberate effort from the service member to where from them when they are home to help to foster that positive relationship and to make sure that their kids know that they are still very present, that they are still loved and cared for, and that we're here to do more than just provide the stability that the household is garnishing from the Marine Corps, right? And man, it really does boil down to spending quality time with them when you do actually have the time.
I will say easier said than done. For me, it was, and it's not about me. Let's go to you. I'm talking about me, but for you, we gotta, peel that onion back. Give me an example, or give the listeners an example of, hey, like this is an example of what I had to deal with. That was kind of, very broad. Both SDAs do the same thing. What specifically that are your kids going through now towards the latter end of your, already done on your second time? I had to say second time on recruiting duty.
Yes. Well, to put into perspective, I never knew when I was going to be able to make it to any family event. If we were scheduled to go camping with the family, if we were scheduled to go trick or treating, and don't get me wrong, SDAs, the command makes a deliberate effort to try and get you off. But when you're doing something like trying to make sure that the Marine Corps is meeting its mission in order for the Marine Corps to stay alive, the mission unfortunately does come first, right? So if trick or treating is happening, but you also have an applicant that needs you to come and get his parental consent during the time you're supposed to be trick or treating, guess what you're doing? You're going to get that applicant's parental consent in order for them to be able to enlist, because you don't know if that's going to be a missed opportunity or a lost opportunity. So, there are nights where you're pulling in, the kids are already in their costumes, and you got to find out where they are in the neighborhood and go meet up with them. And situations like that, they notice because you're not there from beginning to end. So that's the one thing that I could list off that says like, yeah, it's the kids know.
I know that you've been in for quite a bit. At least you can see the light at the end of the tunnel after this enlistment. But I got to ask. I know you're thoroughly indoctrinated, but the spouse, the wives, because we're men,
Yeah.
the wives that we have are not necessarily thoroughly indoctrinated, and they're not in the service, even though we say they are because they're married to a service member. I think they have the hardest job of holding down the house, taking care of the kids, and then our wives have a powerful task of creating the next generation, even whether or not we're present or not. Right? How did you tackle that situation with you and your wife, and what are the after actions of it?
Okay, so my wife, I, God bless her soul. I am blessed to have her in my life because, to your point, recruiting duty or being on an SDA, it doesn't cause issues in your marriage. It magnifies the issues that already lie there, and it brings them to the forefront, right? And one thing that I will say is from the very beginning, my wife was supportive entirely. And I fed her the line of "Give me a year, and it won't be as bad as what it's going to be that first year. Just allow me that time, and then before you know it, everything will return to normal." And it didn't, because that's not what an SDA is. An SDA is legitimately a 3-year sacrifice of your time. And that's exactly what it's going to be the entire time. And she did not kick. She did not scream. Every once in a while, there was I'd come home and you can sense that she was uneasy and felt as if, there was a burden in place, not just because I wasn't home, or yeah, because I wasn't home. There's a burden in place because when you have kids, although we are the providers, we play a pivotal role in the development of our kids. And she's playing that role entirely on her own. And it's not fair, but she handled it with grace. She handled it with grace. So I honestly, in that department, couldn't offer any advice because the only thing that I had to do is make sure that there were open lines of communication, that I was very transparent and what my day to day looked like. If she called, I answered. I could be in the middle of having a conversation with a parent. If she called, I'm picking up the phone. Hey, honey, I'm in the middle of something right now. Let me give you a call back. And I think that collectively on both ends, it helped her to be put at ease. It helped the environment to not be negative and for her to take it in stride. Now, when I finished the first stint on recruiting duty, you can see the weight off of her shoulders lifted, right? And I was excited because I was headed back to the fleet again, 72s, 96s, family fun days, party it up, let's get it. And I think I was all of 2 months back to the fleet. And I came home one day and I told her, I said, I think I messed up. And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I think I messed up. I don't think I should have left recruiting duty. And I'm considering going back." And even though I knew how she felt about the first stint on recruiting duty and how draining it was for her and how much she had to sacrifice in order to make sure that our family unit was held together, she looked at me and said, "I got you. If that's what you want to do, let's rock it out. We'll do it again." And I submitted the package. It got approved. I did tell her that I'll do it on one accord, and that's that we get to come to Sacramento, where she's from. That got approved as well by the grace of God. So we got to be at least close to family, to where she had that support system this time around. And now we're coming out on the opposite end. And again, I came out here with the intent of becoming an 8412, and from the interactions that I have with her, at no point did she ever make me feel like she wasn't there to support, that she had any feelings towards my potential career decision. She legitimately just took it and was like, I'm here for the ride. Wherever you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. And she was rocking it out. But the day that I came home and I told her, I said, you know what? I was wrong. Uh, this is not what I'm gonna do. Again, you could see the way she was like, wait, one more time, just say it slower this time. And I need you to mean it when you say it, right? And I told her, I was like, I don't think that I want to do it anymore. I've come out here. I've seen what it's like twice, and I know that it is out of my system. And I'm more than willing to go back to the fleet and allow that to be where I spend the rest of my career. And yeah, so here we goes. So with that being said, brother, I have no advice in regards to the marriage front. I like to say it was all my wife and our ability to communicate with one another during the tenure on recruiting duty.
That's the advice that's the advice you can give everybody. Uh, uh, Lines of communication, up and down, right? It when you were in, and this is me to say that you do have this is a profound, right? You talk about being in a meeting or a little meeting with parents or whatever the case may be, whatever have you. I don't know what to say about recruiting, but you were in a interview process and your wife called. The priority was your wife, regardless of you making mission, and that is solid and sound advice. Here's why I say that. It's because yes, you're on an SDA where mission is just what it is, right? And the communication allowed for her to be a priority no matter what, right? And that's where I failed as a husband on on drill instructor duty is, maybe my first 2 cycles I was in there, bleed blue. I was freaking just running and gunning, right? And I just wanted it to be successful because unlike recruiting duty, there's a quota tour, right? Now you do certain amount of cycles and you go on quota, vice versa, or you cycle out. But, generally speaking, you do a bunch of cycles and then you quota out and you go take a break. And now you have 72s and 96s and they come on the back end after you put in the work. And so I always thought, man, I'm going to cycle out and just go back on quota. And that's what I did. But in the meantime, I was not communicating. I did not make her a priority, even though she knew my time was all allocated every minute of the day. When it wasn't allocated, I didn't call her. I didn't text her. And that's where I would say, look, if you're going on a SDA, lines of communication across the board. And whether your mission is the SDA, your priority is still your wife and your family. And that's good. That's sound. That's based, man. That's 100%. I agree with you. Even though you didn't feel like you didn't have anything to say, that's a lot to say already.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I couldn't emphasize that more, man. And one thing that we got to realize is the Marine Corps. At some point, we're going to hang up these camis. We're going to hang up that uniform. It'll be the last day that we button up those dress blues. And when it's all said and done, we want to make sure that the people that supported us that entire time are still there. And in order for that to happen, they have to feel like they are a part of the experience, right? And communication does a lot to garnish that. You cannot expect to exit the Marine Corps on your retirement day and to start a relationship with your family then, because in a lot of cases, that's what's happening. We're putting the Marine Corps in the front, and not saying that it doesn't have its place and doesn't have they're going to require what they need of you, right? And you have to fulfill that requirement. We get paid significantly. We have amazing benefits. They are going to ask of you what they're going to ask of you, and you're going to need to show up. But you have to stretch yourself enough for your family to understand that they are still a priority as well. And when you exit, then you have that relationship still in place to where it's a smooth transition out versus I'm retired now. Hey, I want your attention. I want to know who you are, and you have no clue who your family members are,
Absolutely, man. I agree. Well said, Lamont. I appreciate, again, taking the time to be on the podcast. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your family for letting you do this. We don't get paid to run our mouths, and you don't get paid to listen, whoever's listening. So I like to make it short and snappy, straight meat, potatoes, so you get full real quick. I do got to ask, and I think the listeners have to ask too, because across the board, everybody does a recruiting type of duty, right? And for you specifically as a Marine, we have to address adversity, right?
Okay.
And you went twice, and now what the frick? I did that on purpose.
That's pretty legit.
That's pretty legit. I didn't say you can do this like this too. Look. Did it work? Oh, see, I told you. Anyways, god
Oh,
dang
there
it.
you
I
go.
hate those stupid AI crap. Anyways, I'm sorry. Squirrel. Well, you win
There you
twice,
go.
right? You win twice. So we have to address adversity here. The first time, second time, what's the difference on the second time of recruiting? Because as a drill instructor, and I had to relate, on the second time, it's easy. In my, well, at least when I was there, the second time, guys, my goodness, it was just straight black belt, no duties, like no response. I mean, they have responsibilities, but it was just not as the green belt would be. What is the difference
Yeah.
between first and second in terms of adversity, and how did you do to be resilient in those two scenarios?
Oh man. So first time I was a recruiter, obviously you can't go out there and just take over an office in the very beginning. So the second time I was a staff and so I see, and I'll tell you the stark difference between the two, right? So going out there as a recruiter, I do believe that there is something to be said for someone that has a natural ability to talk to people, go up and say what's up and just start a conversation with them. And then someone that doesn't. I for some reason was blessed with the ability to walk up to people and have a conversation and not feel any type of way about it. So recruiting duty, I think the hardest part was getting on the same page as high school students, right? Because right now, as it says, I'm 36 years old. When I first started, I was 30. That's kind of old to be walking into a high school and trying to relate to high school students and to be on the same page in order for them to look at and say, I want to be you when I grow up, because essentially that's what recruiting duty is you're trying to convince someone that what you do and who you are is who they want to be. And that is the hardest part. So I think, and I'll be completely honest, I think the first time I pulled up to a school, I sat in the parking lot for like 20 minutes and was like, I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna go in there eventually. And I think the first time that I got in there and actually started shaking hands and fist bumping and talking to teachers, I was like, okay, it's not as bad as what I thought it was. And then from there, I got my legs under me. So I didn't struggle enlisting people. The approach that I took is I made sure to set up as many presentations as I could because it covered as much ground as possible off the bat. So I would go and talk to the administrators and see who would allow me in their class. I'd give a presentation talking about why I joined the Marine Corps and what it has done for me. And I think in that, people like to hear stories and they like to put themselves in the story, right? People do it all the time when they read the Bible. They put themselves in the disciples' shoes, they put themselves in Jesus' shoes. Well, people do the same thing when they hear other people's stories, especially when it's something that could potentially be their future. So you get up there, and if you're capable of conveying a message well, they're putting themselves in your shoes. So when you do that to 40 to 50 students over a week and you call them, they remember you, they remember what you talked about, they're more inclined to come in and have a conversation about what the future looks like in the Marine Corps for them potentially. The second time, I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut it a little bit shorter. I know you said you like the meat and potatoes. I like to talk. The second time, the second time I came out as a staff in CIC, right? Rewind. First time, hardest part was COVID, hands down. That's it. And I'll dead it there. Hardest part was COVID because we got pulled out of the schools. And as Marines, we're walking billboards where our bread and butter is getting out there and shaking hands and kissing babies, right? And we were no longer allowed to do that. So now we had to resort to alternative measures of recruiting. Second time around, coming out as a staff in IC, it was the first time that I realized that not everyone is a self starter, right? And there's nothing wrong with that because you got Marines that are going to do the job without being prompted. And then you got Marines that need to be prompted, but once they know what they need to do, they kill it. And I was entering an office that had been struggling for quite some time. And they couldn't get their feet under them. So by the time I adopted them, they were broken toys and they were still trying to reinvigorate their mindset to say that they could win. And it was the first time that I had to be in charge of a group of Marines that were struggling, not just with recruiting duty, but with some of the personal things in their lives and things like that. And it was a leadership challenge for me. And I struggled with it. And when it was all said and done, I honestly couldn't get the team up and running, and I found myself, throwing in the white flag, and I'll go back to the fleet. I came out here, I attempted it, and if I could not get this team to run, especially a team that's struggling, which is exactly what I would be charged with as an 8412, is getting struggling teams to get it going. If I couldn't do it, then it wasn't meant for me, right? And I think for me, it was, again, the first time that I realized that not everyone is going to have the same capabilities, and you cannot expect everyone to be you. I thought that coming in, as long as I displayed, hey, this is how you get it done, that they would pick it up and move along. And that's not how it works for everybody.
Mm. That's honest gouge, and you're being honest with yourself in terms of, if I couldn't do it, then this is it. You know what I mean? But at least, you could say that it was a successful second tour. You did what you had to do to be successful, and those around you were successful enough to complete the tour without friction or adversity. And that's good on you as a leader, man. You could take that and run with it into the fleet. So good on you, and kudos to you. I will say that you're not going to get that accountability for yourself, first and foremost for yourself, right? Like I'll say right now, if I go back to the depot, I'll do it right this for a second time. Because the first time was, I was trained the way I was trained. I was an effective drill instructor, and that's just how it was. The second time, I think there's different ways to operate, and that's what you figured out the second time. There's different ways to operate. Not everybody works in the gray or in the black or in the green or in the red. Everybody's different, and I'm glad that you learned and took that into your tool bag, and you're successful, man. I appreciate that, especially being the billboard for the Marine Corps. I will say, you talk about COVID on 2020, and then you talk about 2024 now when you're rotating out your second time. There's some different requirements, obviously, for obvious reasons. I will say talent management, marketing. I've always had a big issue with maybe not the Marine Corps, but just in general. I would say you give a lot of individual tags for individual me's type of thing, right? And I always have that. I got to lead into it with like, hey, what do you want? What do you want? School? What do you want? Fun and adventure? What do you want? This, that, the other, but it's for me. How do you rebuttal that, please? I think a lot of the time we do a lot of me shopping and not a lot of self-service organization shopping. Is that fair?
Well, and here's the thing. When you're going to offer the Marine Corps to somebody, it is a service that you're providing. And you always got to approach it that way. We do a good job of preaching that. I think that it needs to be demonstrated better, meaning that we need a lot more examples of showing what service after the sale looks like, what giving someone a palatable offering of what the Marine Corps experience looks like, right? And to put it in layman's terms, yes, we do a lot of me-focused items, but it shouldn't be that way, because it's not about your Marine Corps experience when you're talking to a kid. It's about what they want out of life. And sometimes the Marine Corps is not going to get them that, right? And that's okay. And that's one thing that I was told coming on recruiting duty, that more or less you should be able to sell everybody. And do I like that challenge? Yes. I'm going to sit down and try and talk to a young man or young woman and get them to believe that the Marine Corps is the best organization for them. But is it logical to believe that that is the case? No, because it won't always be. Now, in regards to marketing and talent management, what if you could hit me with a
you answered my first question, the me part, right? And I think we have to do a better job of selling what is it you sell, the service after the fact, or whatever you said, this little recruiting lingo that you said. So that answers
service after the sale.
Yeah, there you go, service after the sale. So again, as a recruiter, you get a lot of more platform experience. You get to use this little business marketing lingo that I don't really care for, right? But that sounds great. Here's my follow-on question is, what's supposed to follow on? There's politicking no matter whatever SDA you got to go on. There's rules that you got to follow. There's rules that you have to abide by, and not necessarily, or things that you have to do to get somebody in or graduate somebody from recruit training. can you
Yes.
explain some of those politicking games that you played as the first time, and then the second time around in a nutshell?
Okay, so what you have to understand, and I understand the question better. What you have to understand is once there's a big difference between what you're doing in the Marine Corps and what you see as a used sales car person, so to speak, right? When you go to sell someone a car, once they drive that car off the lot, that's their car. It belongs to them, and usually that interaction is happening there, and it's done there. When it comes to getting someone to join the Marine Corps, you are one, getting them to see the value in it, getting them to understand that it is going to benefit them. And then you have to keep them engaged from anywhere from a month to 4 to 5 months, and sometimes a whole entire school year before they go to boot camp. So it's not as if you come in, you talk to the applicant, and yes, I want to be a Marine, and then you could just hands off the wheel and go on about your business. No, you are developing a relationship with the person that you've enlisted. You're developing a relationship with their families, meaning we get more phone calls from moms and dads that are saying, hey, this kid is my son or daughter is not passing high school. They won't make their bed. They won't. And you step in as a mentor and you have to, hey, come here, young man, young woman. I need to get you back on track and get you to understand. But what happens is that relationship developed is what gets you through boot camp. So there are going to be times actively right now. I am not on recruiting duty anymore. And I told all the parents of the kids that I put in the Marine Corps as I'm exiting, here's my personal number. I could have easily just gave like, hey, my government cell phone is no longer attached to me. I don't have to have any contact with you. Don't ask me anything. I did what I was supposed to do. I put someone in the Marine Corps and they're in boot camp right now. But no, that's not how that works. I gave them my personal number. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. And Father's Day was
Sunday.
what day was it? Sunday. I hit up the dad of the one of my guys that's in boot camp. Hey, happy Father's Day. Service after the sale. So it is a relationship developed. It is not as simple as, hey, welcome to the Marine Corps. We want you to join. We got you to sign the paperwork and now I'm hands off. No, not at all.
And let me add to that. There's obviously things that make the job harder. Relationships make the world go round everywhere you go, right? Whether whether drill instructor duty or whether on recruiting duty. More specifically, is women, band members, race, height. I mean, I don't know. I could think of a lot of things that don't really matter to me. I just want somebody that wants to serve their country honestly, and I don't think any of those caveats matter. However, they do matter for some odd reason. Can you touch on those caveats to service that we don't really talk about out in the open? I would like for you to be honest and say, okay, this is what made it more difficult for me to recruit.
So a lot of the requirements for age or not for race, for different types of degrees, that's usually officer side. So we don't deal with that as much, right? However, we do have a certain amount of males that we need to enlist, a certain amount of females that we need to enlist, and in certain demographics, meaning if you're going to go active duty, reserves, so on and so forth, right? And then we have spots for jobs. So those need to be fulfilled as well. Now, luckily, it is Marine Corps wide. So as we're playing chess and getting people in the Marine Corps, we have the ability to move things around and get people what they want and what it is that they're requesting. But naturally, at the beginning of a month, what will happen is you are given your mission letter, right? And I want people, if anybody is listening to this that is not an active duty service member, I want you to understand something about a Marine Corps recruiter. We don't get paid any extra for enlisting anybody. We're not getting anything other than the gratification of knowing that we played a minor role in the future of your success, right? So although we do have a mission to meet, it doesn't mean that you are any less significant to us or to the Marine Corps. It just means that that's what the Marine Corps needs in order to fulfill its obligation and make itself a well-oiled machine. So it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what the Marine Corps needs to make it a well-oiled machine. And we are handling you as if you are a human being, but we do have a mission. Now, if I get told that I have to enlist one male and one female, yes, at the end of the month, I better have that. But it doesn't mean that I cannot enlist two males. It just means that if I enlist two males, I still have to find a young lady to put into the Marine Corps. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And it does complicate things because you're not able to just walk out and anybody that you approach, you can put them in the Marine Corps. They very well may have to meet the demographic that you need. But if you play the game appropriately and you are developing relationships laterally, meaning you're talking to everybody you come into contact with, the likelihood is you're not struggling to find that demographic of person because you've already developed a relationship and they're already in the process of enlisting. So the way that it should work is by the time that you get your feet under you on recruiting duty, that you have the ability to say, okay, I'm mission with what? I'm already working with them. Here you go. These are the people that you need. Now, what else do we need across the recruiting station? And then from there, you can enlist who you need to enlist to help fulfill their obligations as well.
That's solid. That's solid. That answers my question. So the biggest demographic that you got to meet is whether it's a male or female, essentially.
Yeah, that's it.
One's harder than the other. Yes.
It is hard to enlist ladies. It is hard to enlist ladies, and not for everybody. There's some recruiters out there that got it figured out, and they are capable of reeling them in. But it's harder to enlist ladies because I think it's harder for them to picture themselves in a male-dominated organization, right? So I think the Marine Corps does a fantastic job of getting more female recruiters out there in order for there to be representation and for ladies to be able to see themselves in the organization. That it would be the equivalent with pretty much anything, brother. If you don't see your demographic doing a certain thing, then you think to yourself it's not something that's on the table for you, right? But if you see it, then you're like, okay, yeah, me too. So yes, I'd say it's harder to enlist young ladies. It's harder to get them to boot camp. It's harder to get them to stick through the boot camp process. But I do see it becoming having more and more of a success rate as the amount of ladies that are in the service are broadening.
Generally speaking, you talk about, it's just harder to see yourself when it's a male driven organization, and that's factual. I mean, I think across the board, across all the services, it's the same, but even more so in the Marine Corps, which is smaller, so it's even more dynamic in terms of numbers. I would agree with you, but so my question, I mean, just to peel that onion statement back, is there a stigma that you're faced with in terms of receiving women into the Marine Corps, and are there like they're already like, oh, I don't, yeah, blah, whatever the case may be, whatever they bring up, and that's part of the challenge, or is it's just in general it's just difficult to bring women in?
Two stigmas. One, that the Marine Corps is infantry only. That is something that we still are trying to combat. No pun intended. We're still trying to combat, right? And get people to understand that it's much more than just a warfighting organization. That is the foundation that we stand on, but there is so many more jobs that are in support of that warfighting capability that we have. And once we cross that threshold, the second one is usually the idea that if you join the military, that you're going to be sexually assaulted, right? And here's the thing. I don't believe that to be true. Number one, I don't feel as if you join the military that you are going to be sexually assaulted. Is there a possibility that it happens? Yes. Should it happen? Absolutely not. There should be no place in which that is acceptable. But if we're going to highlight the potential for that in the military, you also have to highlight the potential for that in college. You have to highlight the potential for that in your everyday workplace. Unfortunately, it is something that you are seeing across the board, and it needs to be exterminated. It needs to be done. And I don't mean that we need to go just start, getting rid of. Either way, it needs to stop. It needs to stop, no matter where it's at. That be in the Marine Corps, that be at the college, wherever it is. So that's the second one that we struggle with is parents believing that to be true, and also the young ladies believing that to be true. And I think that even in that case, we need more representation that says, or some more young ladies coming out that are singing to the tune of, you know, does it happen? Yes, it happens to males as well. But we need more people that are voicing that, hey, look, I've been in the Marine Corps for this long and it hasn't happened to me. And I'm not saying that we need to only highlight that portion, because the people that have should be able to speak to the fact that they have and get something done because of it, right? So both parties need to be represented in order for the young lady to be able to say, you know what? It's not just if I enlist, I'm going to get sexually assaulted.
Mm, that's good. That's good information. It's you got to have good representation, and every woman every female Marine that comes out and wants to be a recruiter, that's great. You got to have female representation. You got to have a walking billboard says, I am successful. Whatever you're thinking, it's not it. And again, it is reality. It does happen. We're not saying it doesn't. What we're saying is maybe that's not the narrative we should be pushing as veterans that get out or service members that are currently in. That's not appropriate. And again, if you think of 100 and only it happens, again, semantics are formalities, but I agree with you. But it's pretty valid. Those are two friction points for at least women. What do you face with males that you try to get in? Is it even a big deal, or do you got to do a lot of waivers because they smoke weed?
Oh, waivers because they smoke weed is a big one, 100%. And a lot of what we deal with males is I feel they believe that we are lying because there's this salesman stigma attached to what it is that we do. And it is trying to circumvent that thought process, because usually that's the foothold that has them, is as we're having an interaction, instead of them being open to the information, they're just trying to think of how we're lying to them, right? And that problem stems a lot from, you could say, from recruiters that actually do, which I don't think that there's an overwhelming amount of recruiters that are doing that, because in my experience, all the recruiters that I've worked with have had nothing but good intentions with what we do for this job. But it also stems from the fact that there is that inner turmoil from branch to branch, and you can call it friendly competition, but the reality of it is the way that business is done from other branches from time to time is the first thing they do is bash the Marine Corps. Oh, they're lying to you. They're not telling you the truth over there. They don't have this, they don't have that. And that is their tactic. So by the time that they come over to us and they're having a conversation with us, they're singing to the tune of, I can't believe what you're telling me because I've already been told that you're lying to me.
That's solid. That's great. That's actually a hill to climb for sure, especially when we don't toss money at them. Or we don't toss certain things at them, or we don't honestly have certain things that way they have. And then it's a lot of the stuff is pretty factual and pretty based, I would say. Is not being able to throw money at you a scenario that you face a lot of the times in recruiting?
No, because we don't care. That the issue is never going to be money, because when people walk into our office, we know that those that want to be Marines have a certain way that they tick. And money is not going to be the thing that makes them tick. So when you walk in and the first thing that you're asking me for is money, I have a problem. So we're going to talk about why money is important to you. And if we can get to the root of the problem, and the root of the problem legitimately is money, then we will talk about how the Marine Corps is going to provide you financial stability as long as you handle your finances appropriately. Now, if you come in and the root of the problem is just money because you want vanity, and that's the only thing that you're hanging your military career on, brother, we don't want nothing to do with you.
Okay, so you guys aren't that bad after all. Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Well, thanks for that. I do appreciate that, because even for us, there's a stigma out there. Like, I think that has to do with a little bit of us too, because a lot of the junior enlisted, I'll talk about. Yeah, I had no choice. This is the only MOS I had to choose from. I had two, and this one got picked, so I only had one thing, or I went open contract. I guess some of the fleet's fault, some of the Marines' fault. They lied to me, or I didn't got this contract. But either way, man, I would say that I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you got, what to offer, fresh off the streets, Lamont Cordell. One thing for you, I want you to leave. You got about maybe 1 or 2 minutes before you got dinner going on, but I want to ask you. The service member is struggling. Mental health is a thing for men this month. If you didn't know, Mental Health Month for men. What's one thing you for the Marines that are not, for the service members that are not here, if they're listening to you right now, and I think they are, what's one tool for them that they could have used that helped you in terms of adversity and resilience, and something that you could provide the service member now that are struggling with mental health? And go ahead, the floor is yours.
So first and foremost, I need everyone to understand that when we began this journey as service members, I'm pretty sure one of the things that your recruiter talked to you about, and this is service wide, is the family that comes with being a part of the service, right? That doesn't go away. And although you may feel as if you're on an island at some point, or you feel as if you don't have those resources or people to call, or those people that were your battle buddies, the people that you partied with, that you cried with, that you deployed with, you feel like they're not there. My goodness, how much they would love to get a phone call from you when you're struggling, in order for y'all to lean on one another, or for them to allow you to lean on them. So I will offer this. Pick up the phone, one. Two, utilize the items that we have in order to assist you. Go talk to the wizard. Go seek those the help that you need, because when it's all said and done, there's nothing worse than not having you around. And those that are that consider you family want to be able to reach out to you. They want to see you celebrating milestones. And even if it's from afar and you feel like they're not contacting you, my goodness, I couldn't tell you how often I'm scrolling through social media and I'm like, another kid, double tapping that one. They had another kid. This one got married. This one just took a trip to, they're there watching you. The problem is social media has made it to where we no longer pick up the phone on a whim just to check on someone, because we feel like we've already been invested in what they got going on. So put the social media down, call your friends. For those that are struggling, you call your friends. We're here to support. We love you, and utilize all the items that we have to help us with our mental health.
I appreciate it, Lamont. Thank you very much. Listeners, Lamont Cordell, where can they reach you at if they want to know more about you? Any social media handles?
Man, you can find me on Instagram at Lamont_Cordell. Same thing with Threads, same thing with YouTube. And the only thing, if you're looking for me on Twitter, it's Cordell_Lamont, because Lamont_Cordell was already taken. So if you look for me on any platform, usually it's going to be Lamont_Cordell.
That's dope, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Pit Talk, pulling pits and opinions with your host, Gunny G. Follow, like, subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts, and on all social media platforms. Let us know how we're doing. Any criticism is good criticism. Follow, like, subscribe. Lamont, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch. Yeah, man, you got me as a point of contact. So if you're anything, let me know.
Is a podcast featuring active service members who discuss their thoughts and opinions on various issues surrounding military life, current events, and history. The statements heard here are the opinions of its members and guests. These do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Defense and are not endorsed or sponsored in any way. Listener, viewer discretion advised.